Hello, welcome to Move Younger. I'm Kathy Hale. Move Younger is about the three elements of aging well: how we move, what we eat, and how we deal with stress. Today, my guest is Elizabeth Arensberg. Elizabeth is an integrative dietitian, nutritionist who specializes in functional gut health. Welcome to Move Younger, and I am so excited about talking about all this. I have been actually listening to a lot of things on the gut. So my mind is full of ideas and questions. I will just mention that when I looked at your website, I saw that you were inspired by Dr. Walls, probably her TED Talk, or did you see her in person?
Yes, her TED Talk.
Her
Yep.
TED Talk.
Yeah.
And in 2017, when I had Can I Have a Bite, she popped in. I had noticed that she was on her way, but I it was very, very exciting. I had a little bit of a heart palpitations. I had a photo from that day, so I'll post that. So I was just going to read a quote. It's reasonable to propose that the composition of the microbiome and its activities are involved in most, if not all, of the biological processes that constitute human health and disease. That's from Dr. Martin Blazer of Rutgers, chair of the human microbiome at Rutgers University. Can I read or not? So, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, sure. So I love hearing that. I know you sent me that little quote earlier, so I found
Uh,
it so interesting. And I think it really feeds into how, we've lived so long where a lot of us struggle with like symptoms or conditions and we
mhm.
don't know where to look, right? And then I feel like recently over, not recently, but over the decade, we've learned that our gut microbiome is so influential on the symptoms that are popping up, right? So instead of putting band-aids on these symptoms that most of us struggle with, from inflammation to anxiety to digestive disorders, we're learning a lot more about how our gut microbiome has a direct correlation and connection to a lot of these things we're seeing, from even like skin conditions and low immunity too.
I even saw that it's connected to mental health.
Yes.
And there was a report about how adding supplements that are naturally occurring in the body, but just boosting them and balancing them out, you can address that. But how did it completely changed mental health?
Totally. That's probably been one of, from my, just from learning and working with clients, that's probably one of my most eye-opening sides of how the microbiome does influence the
Mhm.
gut-brain connection. So I know we were talking in the brain, we have our first brain, but then we also know the gut is essentially our second brain.
Second
And it
brain.
does communicate through the vagus nerve. So I always think of the vagus nerve as that open telephone line runs from the back of the brain to the abdomen, and they talk back and forth to each other, which is pretty incredible. And that really goes to show that the bacteria in our gut, it actually is going to influence its communication with the brain. So we know about like 80 to 90% of serotonin, that happiness hormone, is
Uh-huh.
made in the gut. And then about 50% of dopamine is made in the gut. And dopamine is that feel good hormone.
Yes.
So if we are not feeding that gut microbiome, we're not going to be producing the serotonin, the dopamine, the amount we need it to be to influence our mental wellness as well. So, it makes sense when people say if we have an unhealthy gut, we have an unhealthy mind, and it can be
Mhm.
vice versa too.
So, if someone were looking at balancing that communication, I guess would be the way to say it,
Yeah.
how would you? I know there's a lot of things to address, but is there something with diet or with improving digestion, or what would be their first step they could take from listening to this podcast? Maybe.
Yeah, I love that. So I would say diet, absolutely, first
Mhm.
thing to implement. And a lot of it is essentially just bringing more diversity to your gut. So the first thing I always think of with diversity is essentially your plants, your plant food. So your
Mhm.
veggies, your fruits, anything with color. As cheesy as it seems, it's if we can actually eat the rainbow, you're going to have a lot more diversity in that gut microbiome. Different strains of bacteria enjoy different colors, which is kind of a funny little quirk that we
Oh wow! Oh
yeah.
wow! That's
So we
so
can, it
interesting.
is. So we can test, for example, Akkermansia is one common bacteria strain we'll test for, and we know that one responds really well to more of our red, deep red foods, and it can help it flourish a little bit more. So it's kind of cool when if we think if we can really eat the rainbow, we can eat diversity in those plants. You're going to help grow and maintain more healthy, diverse bacteria, which in turn is going to foster the brain health too.
And so I love that. I love that, and I love eating the rainbow myself.
Yeah.
How about when it comes to, do you want to address anything with farming on that? It's,
Yeah, so definitely, obviously, farming, farming's changed over decades of pesticides, all the stuff that gets put on the type of foods we're eating. So, we do see that organic soil, or if the food's more locally grown, if we go to the farmer's market, typically the soil is even more rich as well. And that product, the produce we're getting, tends to also be more nutrient dense. So it's going to be typically darker in color, probably tastes a little better, and you're also getting more nutrients from it. So if you have means to buy more locally or buy where it is organic produce, even better. But again, there are situations where people can't budget for that or it's not
Mhm.
possible. So in those instances, trying to make sure we're cleaning the product or at least picking, from that dirty dozen, trying to pick fruits and veggies that are not on that list as much as possible when we can do that.
And to address the dirty dozen, my way of remembering it was that if you're eating the skin, you want to avoid it or eat that organic as opposed to a banana where you're not eating the skin, kind
Yeah,
of thing.
that's a great way to remember it. I like that. That makes it much easier.
And I will add from the first podcast I did, we talked about CSAs, which is a great way to get local, often organic produce,
Mhm.
but also the distance that is going from farm to your plate, it also makes it more nutritious.
Yes, that's such a good point too. Of like when we get it from California, we're Midwest. That's many weeks to get here.
Yes, anyways. And when it comes to feeding yourself with animal proteins, what would you advise on that?
Yes, so pretty similar. If you're able to do grass fed, that is
Hmm.
always a better option because, of course, what the animal's eating, you will be ingesting too
Hmm.
typically. So if you can do grass fed, that's going to be a better option. Same thing with dairy products. If you can do grass fed, grass finished, that's always a really good alternative because again, they're going to have more exposure to different nutrients versus just like the basic feed at the other feeding lots.
And with animals that maybe are not specifically grass fed, like chickens or pigs or pork, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Were you just asking with
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions
yeah.
as far as
The,
that?
the first one I think more about is with like chickens again,
Hmm.
especially for their eggs, trying to do the pasture raised as much as
Hmm.
possible. I know I have a harder time finding like the chicken and the pork as really clean options. So that one I found more success at just going to the farmer's market and seeing what they feed them as well.
Exactly. That's really exactly how I do it too. And it's really wild. Honestly, the flavor difference with all of those things is just so amazing. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
my daughter-in-law, I said this last podcast too, but they're raising chickens, so I get these amazingly fresh eggs, and
Yeah.
they hold for so long.
Yeah.
Which even when I buy them from a local commercial farm here, that you probably know as well, the refrigeration life is
Yeah.
good, but they're so much longer when they're fresh like that. So, what are the signs of a problematic microbiome system?
Yeah. So most common signs are going to be those digestive symptoms. So things like constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux,
Hmm.
not having regular bowel movement. So if it's not that normal smooth snake shape, usually putting some flags that the gut's not very happy. Other symptoms, even on the other side, are things like skin conditions. So things can pop up as like psoriasis, acne,
Hmm.
eczema, like cysts as well. And then I also would think of low immunity. So if you get sick very frequently, about 70% of your immune system's in your gut. So again, the first place you'd want to look is your gut unbalanced and unhappy as well. And then of course, like we said, from more mental health, kind of like anxiety, depression, some of those conditions are linked with unhappy gut bacteria.
And how recent is it you think that this was became more known? Because in '95, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and I was there wasn't a lot known about it. With sarcoidosis, they didn't know much about it. I didn't fit the profile, all these things. And I happened to be working with an organic farmer at the time on setting up the first CSA. And
Mhm.
so I had all of this organic produce that was left over, and I can cook. And so I noticed immediately the difference in my energy from eating that. In '95 in Kansas City or in the Midwest, organic stores were maybe not even here. There
Hmm.
might have been tiny little health food stores. So it was unusual to be able to get that much proliferation of organic produce across my diet. And it was just fascinating. So that was like my first clue that, oh, this food is different. But I don't remember anybody talking about it in 95
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
even later for a long time.
It's like a lot. I don't even growing up thinking, even in high school, like I never recall hearing about the gut microbiome or how food influenced it. I always knew like a balanced diet's probably healthy, but never understood kind of components behind it. And I remember I didn't get exposed to understanding the gut microbiome probably till I was close to my last few years in college of even getting exposed to it. And I think that's what kind of sparked my interest. So I can only imagine like I don't really know when all this stuff first started coming out, but I do feel like it's starting to become, a lot more available to people to understand.
I almost wonder, I don't know that either exactly
Yeah.
because I was aware of it at a time where nobody, the majority of people were not. And
Yeah.
even for a long time, it felt sort of like I couldn't explain it in a way that made them think I knew what I was talking about, I guess. Or I seemed to be a little extreme. Um, but maybe it was like a Dr. Walls. I don't remember when that TED talk was, but I mean, that was pretty amazing to learn about how much an anti-inflammatory diet, which is very different than exactly what we're talking about now, but how the diet alone um, changed her whole, what was it? MS, wasn't it?
MS. Yeah.
MS, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Crazy.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that was I was trying to decide if I wanted to do dietetics, and the professor at the university, that's the first video she played us, was Dr. Terry Wall's TED Talk, where she talks about how she reversed her MS with food. And that was where I was like, whoa, like it really can be medicine. So I think I watched that probably in like 2015, I think. So it was
Yeah,
probably
that
before.
sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So definitely eye opening. Yeah.
What's the difference between dietetics and what you ended up doing? Was that you said there was a change?
No, so I was not in nutrition when I got to
Oh, you
college.
were not nutrition. I'm sorry.
Yep. So I was deciding what to do, and I saw that video, and I was like, oh, I'll be a dietitian. So,
Sorry, I was trying to make sure I didn't miss something.
oh, no, no.
Hold on, I'm gonna. The focus on thin is beautiful, and I'm anti-diet culture in general because for the most part, diets to me are restrictive, and rather than focusing on what does our body the most good, we focus on just losing weight and
Right.
it's hard to explain that fats are good. It's hard to explain that gluten can be good. And it's hard to explain. I mean, gluten's real good to me. That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. Yes.
It's all about the farming. Once again, it's all about the farming. But
Totally.
you know, so it's been this on forever from Weight Watchers on. The history of Weight Watchers is interesting, but from Weight Watchers on, there's been this aversion to eating, I would say, whole food.
Totally. Yeah.
Like butter became bad because of marketing
Hmm. Eggs.
and things like that.
Yeah.
And so now I feel like we're in what to me is one of the kind of the scariest times with these weight loss drugs.
Hmm.
When I realized that there was so much controlled by the gut,
Yeah.
I thought, what happens? My understanding with the drugs is they halt your appetite so you
Hmm.
don't feel hungry.
Yeah.
But what is that doing inside to the 70% of our immune system
Yeah.
and our second brain?
Yeah.
So there you go. Take
Yes.
it away.
It definitely raises some questions, and it makes me curious to know. I think the trickiest part is with the drugs, right? It's, we don't know what the long term impact will be. I did try to dig around because there's always just new research coming out with the GLP-1s. It's hard to keep on top of them.
Uh-huh.
But I try to look more specifically to see, what researches have been are being conducted at the moment to look at the diversity of the gut microbiome. And I did see some cases where it was saying, longer term use was showing a reduction in that abundance of the gut diversity. And you make a good point, if we're losing the appetite, is it because we're just not feeding it? Or is it the drug alone? It's kind of the up in the air, what's causing what. And I
Right.
think, yeah. And
So
I
we don't know at this
yeah,
point.
I
Right?
think I think we don't know is just from what I was gathering, it was saying there was a drop in diversity, but then you have to ask the question of, well, is it the specific mechanism of the drug? Is it the fact that they're not really eating tons of food? What's
Mhm.
impacting that? And then I think the other concern I always think around is, you hear about the side effects of the GI upset if they're dosed too high or something like that, where it can slow the gut motility too. And that can be concerning too, because if we have a slow gut motility, we're going to have more backup in our waste. And if we have waste just lingering in our GI tract, that's going to feed unhealthy bacteria and can
Mhm.
deplete the healthy bacteria. So I think, personally, I don't know what's going to come of everything and if it's going to be long-term effective or if it's going to negatively impact the gut. I think it's definitely up in the air for that area.
So if you had someone come to you specifically for weight loss, as opposed to my digestion's off or
Mhm.
whatever, or a health reason,
Yeah.
what would you do or advise to them?
Yeah. So I think definitely I'm not a pro in the weight loss area.
Mhm.
I'll be
Mhm.
totally transparent there. I think the first thing I always ask about is both looking at nutrition and lifestyle. So when it comes to the nutrition side of, are we able to implement some of those whole food components of our veggies, our fruits, our proteins, those healthy fats, kind of analyzing, what are we already doing with our food? And
Mhm.
then also from the lifestyle perspective of, I heard you say at the beginning of the podcast, is stress is huge. Stress
Yes.
can play such a big impact
Yes.
on our metabolic health, on our inflammation. So when we have really high stress, we see the cases of weight loss resistance as well. So it does make me, I think if someone came to me, I would initially just want to look more deep at what are they currently doing from a nutritional lifestyle
Mhm.
perspective. And then, if they are to go down that route, I would think of ways, how could we support you from a gut microbiome diversity side as well?
One thing I'll add from my
Yeah.
side of cooking for people
Yes.
or having a meal prep business is I focused entirely on organic. It was 99% organic, which made it a hard model to be profitable. But, I, sometimes I'm more idealistic than,
That's okay.
than maybe I should be. But I would have people come in and, because it was meal prep, it was packaged, it was not always obvious how filling it was, how much food it was, but it really was a normal portion. But it
Yeah.
looked smaller than what we get at like a restaurant
Mhm.
or might think of, to fill a plate. But can't even say how many times someone would say, I'm so full from what you made. And I'm like, yes, that's because this food is feeding your cells, it's
Yeah.
feeding your body. So your body's saying, that was great. Let's stop now,
Yeah.
and it changes everything. And I, oh, I could talk on and on about this as far as people and diet, but I mean, that's something that I noticed from customers. And of course, I was going to say my staff, when we would have to move to a new place
Mhm.
and we were down, all of us would say, oh my gosh, it's so hard not to just be able to grab this ready-made food
Yeah.
that we had available,
Yes.
So it's, to me, also a lack. And there's also a problem with the fast food culture in that we think of cost as being not a factor in food. But if you would actually spend the money on something healthy, you could lose weight without the drugs and also help your health.
Mhm.
That's just
Yeah. Yes.
I'm adding all that in.
No, it's good.
um, Actually, I want to go back. Oh, I know this probably isn't something people want to hear on podcasts, but is there a way to assess, like you talked about? I'll use my nurse mother's terms, bowel movement.
Yes.
If that is proper or what's normal, because I, it's sort of undiscussed. It's a taboo topic to really talk about. And so, what would be something that someone would look for to know it's normal?
Yeah, I love that. So I do this all the time with clients. So poop just does not gross me out at all. We get very descriptive. So first baseline of what a normal bowel movement is, the best description essentially is like a smooth snake-shaped bowel movement where it's
Hmm.
all formed and
Hmm.
again it's easy to pass. There is a thing called the Bristol stool chart that you can just Google it and it comes up with a chart and has about 6 phases on it. And the middle is going to be that normal bowel movement. And then moving in one direction from like 1 to 3, that's going to be more of the constipated stool where it's like small, hard pebbles. It's harder to pass.
Mhm.
Then we're going to go on the other side of the spectrum where it's getting to the more loose bowel movement. So we want to be in that perfect middle.
Mhm.
And if you start to sway one way or the other, that's where I always tell people first thing we want to think about what's your intake been lately from nutrition and hydration as well. That's going to play a big role on the bowel movements
Yeah,
too.
I want to ask about water. Yeah.
Yeah. And then last thing I will say with the bowel movements, if we're thinking from a digestive perspective and understanding, your gut bacteria, it does help break down food. And then also in our digestive tract, we have our digestive juices. So those enzymes and the stomach acid that help break down the food properly. So we need both of these things. And if you're finding in your stool tons of undigested food or fatty, oily, mucus substances, that again is going to give you the clue in of, okay, my gut bacteria needs some love and potentially my digestive juices do too.
So the way to balance it would be to maybe add some digestive enzymes.
You could do enzymes, or even before getting to a supplement, if it's not too bad, you could do what we call bitter foods.
Oh,
So things that help naturally stimulate your digestive enzymes. So this would be things like lemons, limes, apple cider vinegar. Those are the pretty baseline ones.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
That, oh God, I keep going off.
you're good. I know it's a
Thing.
big.
So it's just interesting because recently I had some dental work
um,
done that I had to get an implant. There you go,
okay.
British teeth, and I had to go on this what I call just white food diet because it was cottage cheese,
Oh yeah.
yogurt. I couldn't have citrus. I couldn't have tomatoes. I couldn't have all these things. I could have coffee for some reason, but I was just sort of mushy food, and also couldn't chew very well.
Yeah.
Um, and it was for 6 weeks.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
so long, and this had to do with a bone graft.
Okay.
It's a long dental story, but my digestion got crazy. It was just crazy, and that'll be my description.
That's crazy.
And it took a while of me really focusing on what I had to do to balance it because I am not a dietitian.
Yeah.
I just thought, what is wrong?
Yeah.
And that was just a momentary medical moment, where I
Yeah.
had to follow this, which I'll say has kind of happened to me a few times where you're told to restrict because of
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you can't say exactly how long something might take. That's
Mhm.
interesting to know about the citrus being so important. How about fermented foods and things like that, and how long these things might take to help you
Yeah.
recover
Yeah. So
or
I would
get
say,
better?
yeah, I love that. So it's interesting because sometimes you can see, let's say someone's more on like the loose stool spectrum and they start to implement more of the fiber in our probiotic food. So when we think of like the probiotic foods, I always tell people think of them as the healthy gut bacteria that you're going
Mhm.
to get into your gut. And then that fiber, so a lot of our prebiotics and our probiotics, fiber is what's going to help actually feed the healthy bacteria. So you have to have fiber to actually grow and maintain the garden in your gut. And again, when I start with someone who maybe is more on that loose side, sometimes they can see improvements as little as 2 weeks if they start to implement pretty heavily and consistently of changing up their food with probiotics and fiber. Some people it takes more time, right? It can take up to 3 months, 4 months. But we do see in research that you can shift the gut microbiome in a shorter stint of time than what we would probably expect in most cases.
Yeah, I should add part of mine was an inability to chew on one side. So
Yes.
that was probably a problem. And when you say fiber, let's just list whole grains. Go
Yep.
on.
Whole grains, oats, beans, nuts, seeds. Let's see, what did we miss? Fruit. Your fruit's going to count in
Mhm.
there. Your starchy carbs. And then I also always think of our other category, like those resistant starches. So these are the starches that make it down a little bit farther to the colon. Typically, they make it more undigested and they're more of that fuel for the colon. So they make it much farther down in that GI tract. And the food that the colon can really feed off of is going to be things like cooled and cooked potatoes and cooled and cooked rice, or again, like oats.
Wait, cooled and cooked?
Yes, or sorry, cooked and cooled. So
Oh,
you,
cooked and
I'm
cooled.
doing backwards. Cooked and cooled.
So
So,
cooked and
yep.
cooled. So not meaning that you're eating it cold, but that you're eating it later.
So a good way to think about it, like let's say you made a big batch of baked potatoes in the
Mhm.
oven, and then of course you let it cool completely and you have them the next day for leftovers,
Hmm.
you can reheat them, but then by those potatoes going through the process of having them cooked, they've fully cooled, you pop them in the fridge. When they go through that process, the amount of resistant starch in them actually increases. So it
Okay.
essentially becomes more fibrous in a way.
Okay. You can reheat them. You're not destroying that, right? You
Yep.
can. Okay.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can eat them. Don't have to eat them cold.
Don't have to eat cold potato,
Yeah. Yeah, don't have to. It won't
even
force
though I could.
you. Yeah.
Um, oh shoot! Now there was something else you talked about with this recovery, and I should be writing notes down. Okay, you talked about fiber. You talked about um, fats. Was a fat? When you look at the chart, you can kind of get a guide as to what you might need to do for that.
Yes. So if you were finding more of like the loose mucus stool as well, that could tell us one, thinking, did you just eat something extremely greasy? Like, did you just get a burger from a fast food
Mm.
restaurant? Or are you getting fat in that your body's not able to digest as well as we need it to be? So that one's actually pretty similar to the enzymes where you can do more of those bitter foods because again, it can help stimulate some of those, that bile and enzymes that can help break down the fat better in
So
the system.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's possible to just look for an explanation on this, or do you have anything on your website or
Oh,
just a guide?
no, I have. I'm trying to think if I have a digestive guide, I believe. So I'll see if I have it and I can pop it in. And even thinking, from both the enzymes, but you were kind of mentioning with like the dental work.
Mhm.
The other thing we always think of with digestion is that meal hygiene. So that goes into regards of starting with, are we chewing the food? Because digestion really does start in the mouth. We have to chew the food
Mhm.
significantly. You got to chew it close to like the 20 to 30 times for it to be more broken down. And then it can be easily digested. So if we're those people who are like fast eaters or inhaling, you could be more likely causing more stress on the gut too, because then it's going to have to really, really work to break down the food as well.
That's really interesting. And I will list your website and
Perfect.
whatever. All the links will be in the back notes on this as
Awesome.
well. So I have a question about what steps should we take, but I don't know if we've already said that or not. Let me read one more quote because I want to get back to this one. I'm also really fascinated because right now with all the stress in the
Yes.
world at large, how much of an impact that would have. So this is our gut responsible for our moods and behavior? And this is a quote. And this, I sorry, I didn't write down where these are from, which website I went to. As a whole, the Western world is losing diversity in its gut microbiome. Things like antibiotic use, spending all of our time indoors, and moving into the cities have contributed to this loss in biodiversity. Antibiotics are like a nuclear bomb for our microbiotate, right?
I
Didn't say
believe
biome.
it.
Okay, we'll just say microbiome, and can quickly change its composition, potentially leading to, oh boy, another word, dysbiosis.
Yeah, dysbiosis,
Okay,
perfect.
an imbalance in the gut microorganisms is what that is. This can have both short and long term effects on your health since the microbiome is critical in many physiological processes, including regulation of metabolism and immunity. So, is there a way to talk about the metabolism and the
Yeah,
immune system and the immune system?
yeah. And with is that something? Oh, and with the dysbiosis too. So I love that it mentions both the stress and like us living indoor, not being outside. A
Hmm.
lot of research shows, they've compared people who grow up on farms, more out in land, their gut diversity is significantly higher and better than all of us who are inside. Everything, especially, is extremely sanitized now. So there is just huge shift
Especially
in.
since COVID,
Yes, yeah. Since COVID,
more so, more so.
everything's been very, very sanitized, which again, then we're not getting that exposure to bring more diversity to the gut as well. And I think stress is huge. That's one of the first things that I will work on with a lot of clients is we have to also have stress and lifestyle in check to improve that gut because unfortunately stress will deplete healthy gut bacteria as well.
It's
Yes,
really interesting.
yeah.
So, how do you work on that? Work on stress?
Yes. Well, I think you would be good. You would have some good tips here. But I always think of from a perspective of how can you exercise the vagus nerve because we know that's going to be the brain and the gut connection,
Mhm.
and little exercises that can help kind of ignite that vagus nerve are things like deep breathing, meditation, yoga. We know like singing and deep humming, kind of like that hum you do in yoga together, that vibration can help activate the nerve. Even gargling water can help vibrate and activate the nerve.
Oh,
And then
interesting.
even like a cold shower or some cold exposure to kind of shock you into that more calm nervous system.
So we need to stimulate a lot of things in our body, really. We need to, have food that we have to chew,
Yes. Yes.
get outside, get a little dirty,
Yeah.
stop wiping everything down.
Yeah. Yes.
And I know from working in the food industry, you become almost obsessive about wiping
Hmm.
things for the health department
Oh,
reasons, and that's very important, but
yeah.
it can become a little, um, especially after COVID, you can just
Yeah.
kind of get a little crazy about it.
Totally. Yeah. Which I agree. I think that was a huge shift of just sanitation.
I mean, this is neither here nor there, but I've taught Pilates for a long time, and I'm back to teaching Pilates. And since
Oh,
COVID, everything's wiped at the end of class.
yep.
And I mean, yes, you want to have a little bit of cleaning, but it just feels like okay, that's a new change.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, so I think definitely when it comes to the gut, I think if you're looking at it from like two prongs, the one side of the food, like we mentioned, of really that diversity of like how many plants can you get in the week? That's going to be a lot of your fiber as well. So, can you get 30 different plants within the week? And that will help bring some more of that diversity in. And then we talked about the probiotic foods. So your yogurts, your cottage cheese, your sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, all of those fermented options, trying to get those in daily. You're varietying those plants and veggies. And then from like that lifestyle perspective, the stress management is huge.
yes, I mean I would love also to. I always want to list things, have like a little, but that's so good when you say 30 different plants. So you're thinking, this is actually eat the rainbow. So just focus on eating the rainbow and maybe not have like kale every night or but have kale, chard, spinach, lettuce, or your
Yes.
green. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, that's why I tell people like try to count how many plants you get in a week, and you'll count the garlic, the onion you might cook in. So
Hmm.
all of those little things can count, and also using, which I know you're a fantastic cook, so even leaning into the herbs, the spices,
Hmm.
anything that brings color and variety, that's a good way because the more variety you have, the more your gut gets to feed off of and exposure to grow all of those different variety strains of the gut microbiome.
When it comes to another reason to eat locally and from local farmers is that commercial production of food is we've had so much, maybe it was just I was aware of it, but there were so many food contaminations last year. It
Yes.
was literally everything from ice cream to deli meat
Yeah.
to I
Carrots.
mean eggs and
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think anything. It was kind of surprising to me, but a lot of that, from my understanding, has to do with just the production and the massive amounts. And you can have one little thing go wrong because you're not attending to it. This is
Mhm.
my simple way of explaining. And then you have massive quantities tainted by possibly just some bad water that got in there or
Yeah.
something like that. Oh, that makes me think my other question
Oh yeah,
when
you
you
did have a
talk about
question.
hydration.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that again, where it's like it's a cool opportunity when we have farmers markets nearby, because one, it forces you to eat seasonally because
Mhm.
with the way we get food, you can have anything year round. But
Yes.
if you're at the market, you can get something seasonally, and then kind of like you said, it's not being mass produced, so there's probably less likelihood of E. coli or some contamination that is
Mhm.
not fun to deal with in your gut. That's just going to set you even farther back.
And when it comes to hydration of the body, um, what are things that are good to do and not, like um, I've heard drinking, because our water tends to have a lot of stuff in it, that
Yes.
having a purified water like a reverse osmosis is good,
Mhm.
but then that's also stripped. And maybe we should add some things to it and things
Yeah,
like that. So,
perfect.
what advice?
But so if you have the opportunity to filter the water, like reverse osmosis, Berkey, whatever you want,
Mhm.
that's always a good option, just so you can take out things we don't want from heavy metals, whatever it will be in the water. And then you make a really good point of things that can get stripped from it, and it's usually those minerals. And then I also always think, minerals, unfortunately, stress actually depletes our mineral status. So most of us tend to be more depleted in minerals, especially magnesium. That one is the most tricky minerals to get on top of because it's harder to get through our food because of soil shift, but then also, again, stress is going to burn through magnesium. So it burns through minerals, but especially that magnesium. So I'm a huge fan of actually adding minerals to water,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's adding, I know in those reverse osmosis, you can add trace minerals, like concentrates trace minerals. I'll add once a day. I'll make like, I call it a mineral mocktail. It's
Mm-hmm.
essentially like those electrolytes, but you can do tons of DIY versions. So coconut water is a natural electrolyte. It has the
Mm-hmm.
sodium, potassium, and a little bit of magnesium in it. Or they make just different powders and mixes that you can actually add to your own water to restore those minerals too.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about this. So adding just a touch of coconut water would add the minerals if you went and got a bottle of water or made or had a pitcher that you
Mhm.
filtered and then just maybe put a little enough to like a teaspoon or a tablespoon might be enough.
The
Maybe
coconut water, you would do more
more
of
of
the
that. Okay.
yeah, more than that. But if you were to do, they make these mineral drops. They're
Uh-huh.
completely unflavored and it's just straight minerals. So you can actually just drop those into your water. So if you did a big water jug, you
Uh-huh.
could taper it in that, and it would be like, I mean, if you did a big water jug, depending on the product you got, it'd be like maybe 40 drops or something.
And are you making the mineral drops or are you buying the mineral
No, I
drops?
buy them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I can't make them. I don't know how to, but I do have with that. I actually have a mineral guide as well on my website,
All
or
right.
like mastering minerals, and it teaches you how to make like little mineral mocktails to help
Oh,
you hydrate
awesome.
better too. Yeah.
Okay.
So
We will include all those links
perfect. Yeah.
because it is a lot to you know to wrap your head around. I know from just talking to customers and Pilates clients, which led me to have the food business and all that, that it can be overwhelming.
Oh,
So I
absolutely.
love how you're breaking it down into just some simple things because it can just feel like, well, where do I even begin?
Mhm. Yeah, I agree.
Besides the farmer's market, and then all I get it right now are
Yeah.
leeks and greens. What am I supposed to do?
Start small steps. Yeah, even if it's like if you're not already eating plants in the week or veggies, it's like what's one veggie you can add this week? Just starting small.
Mhm.
Really are implementing tons of the whole foods too.
Maybe we should have a follow up where we work through some small steps. That would be really interesting to do as a follow up
That
podcast.
would be fun.
I'm planning it
I
now.
love it. I'm in it. Count me in. I love
Is there something I forgot to ask? I don't
it.
know if I had. Look at the notes.
I have it pulled up. Let's see. So we did signs your microbiome's off. We did that. The mood and behavior. We touched on the Ozempic. Steps to support the gut. We kind of sprinkled that in. Those were the four.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, nailed it.
I ordinarily follow, but I haven't followed very well today.
No, it was
Um, so I'd like to end with what advice would you give your younger self? Because you're young, but as we move on through life, I feel like through most of my life, I feel like, oh, if I'd only know that then, or whatever. So,
I
what
would
advice would you give your younger self?
I would say trying to find or remember that you get to cook, that you get to grocery shop. I think we put it in this category of like it's so mundane and people put it in the back burner of like you have to, but I think it's fun to think a bit more of like make it fun, make cooking fun, make grocery shopping fun. And then I think you find a lot more enjoyment in what you get to eat and then see kind of the like powerful connection the food has with your body too.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. That makes me think we should do some sort of connection of the food, but of little reels or something
Yes.
of how to do stuff.
That would be
I totally this time of year, May or I'm sorry, June. We just went into June, so this time of year, from all of summer, from spring through fall, really, at least in the Midwest, it is a glorious time to
yeah.
discover all of this
Yeah.
because there is such a wealth of variety at the
Mhm.
farmers market. I mean, right now at the Brookside Market
Yeah.
here in Kansas City, you can get microgreens, you can
Mhm.
get all kinds of different variety of all kinds of greens, which are common right now. But we also have the new roots farmers, and
Yeah.
you can find fresh ginger, fresh cilantro all summer, which is crazy, and just every single variety of anything you want. And so you really could just play with this
Yeah.
eating 30 different vegetables by what's my new thing to try at the market this week and have fun with it.
Oh, I love that.
And
Yeah.
and cooking doesn't have to be mysterious.
No.
It can be very simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll find a way to do that.
Delicious. I love that. I'm excited to go shop on Saturday.
Well, I love this. I think I've already planned a couple of things.
Right? Yeah, it's been fun to chat.
But I think it's so important. So we are going to work on that to have a follow up of how to create a structure for yourself in some way that'll just
Yeah,
be for the average person,
perfect.
that
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think
thing.
that'd be great.
Because
Handy.
it's it's easier than they think, and
Yeah.
it'll change them more rapidly than
Hmm.
they think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I think it helps when you break it down like smaller, like reminding people like you don't have to overhaul everything at once. It's just like one small shift and then we'll build.
one small shift.
Yeah.
And also thinking of the stress and magnesium. I mean, magnesium helps if you are under a lot of stress. Just adding that little bit of magnesium can help you sleep. It can just calm
Mhm.
you down. I have to ask you something. I remember hearing once that craving salt was an indication of lack of magnesium.
Yes. And I always think of it as just like dehydration too. Like your
Oh,
body.
it's a.
Yeah.
Is there a way to? I am. As you see, I'm always. I just have a dry mouth. It seems like when I talk. But is there anything besides adding minerals to water that you can do for dehydration?
I do like sea salt too. So like if you did the minerals, you could add sea salt to your water.
Mhm.
Lemon and lime can be kind of nice too to get a little of the vitamin C from it.
And the acid that
Yeah,
makes so
and the
much
acid. So you can
sense.
do like a little mocktail, a little
A little
combo.
mocktail, and so that would maybe help with the just dehydration of summer or life.
Rehydration. Yeah, it can help. The nice thing is it helps with
Just
yeah,
daily life dehydrating.
yeah, definitely. Especially if you feel thirsty. That's I always tell people if you're feeling thirsty, you really want to get minerals in, and that will
Mhm.
really help. And you'll find. I feel like a couple of years ago, before I started doing minerals, like I could not quench my thirst. It drove me crazy. I couldn't quench it for the life of me. And then I finally added minerals in. I was like, oh, it
That's
makes
it.
a difference.
I need to play with this because I do have kind of an ongoing, a little bit. I don't know if it's a talking thing, but just a little bit of a dry
Yeah,
mouth when I'm
yeah,
teaching. I get the same thing, so I'm always
yeah,
carrying water with me.
yes, yes. You
Well,
have to try that.
I will try that. I will try that. I have not added salt, so I will try that.
Yeah,
I thought about it, and I just kind of do what everybody does and forget until I'm
yes.
thinking about it again at
It's
the
on my
wrong
list.
time.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so
Oh,
much for coming.
yeah.
We're right at 45 minutes, so we're
Yeah,
good.
this is awesome. Thanks for having me. It was so fun to catch up and chat too.
I know. It's been so much fun. I'm such a nerd about learning that this is like scratching an itch for me,
Yeah.
and I feel like I could talk forever about this in
Yeah.
so many different levels.
I know.
So I'm excited about everything
Yeah.
that you're doing. I could go on and on and on about some
Yes.
more questions, but
I
we'll
know.
keep it general. We'll keep it general today.
Yeah, perfect.
Um, but thank you so much, and I'm going to do my sign off, which is remember to feed your body, move daily, and breathe.
I love it.
And thank you, and I look forward to doing this again.
Thank you.
Thanks.